formlessness and a purely quantitative character are one and the same. To the extent that things are considered only in terms of their quantity, their form is disregarded. This is most evident if they are weighed. Therefore, money as such is the most terrible destroyer of form. No matter what the reason is that the forms of things A, B and C cost the same price of M, their differentiation, the specific form of each of them, does not affect their fixed value at all but is submerged in the M which equally represents A, B and C. Form is not a determining factor within economic valuation. As soon as our interest is reduced to the money value of objects, their form, even though it may have brought about their value, becomes irrelevant just as it is irrelevant to their weight. This may also explain the materialism of modern times which, in its theoretical significance, necessarily has a common root in the money economy. Matter as such is simply formless, the counterpart of all form, and if it is accepted as the only principle of reality, reality is submitted to broadly the same process that the reduction to money value exercises on the objects of our practical interest. I shall come back to the problem of how money in extraordinarily great quantities and fundamentally in connection with the threshold importance of money quantities attains a particular and, at the same time, more individual form, thereby removing it from its empty quantitative nature. The formlessness of money declines relatively and even outwardly the more its quantity increases. The small coins of the earliest Italian copper currency remained shapeless or had only a crude round or cubical form. The biggest pieces, however, were usually cast in a four-sided ingot form and provided with a mark on both sides. But the universal formlessness of money as money is certainly the root of the antagonism between an aesthetic tendency and money interests. Aesthetic interests are so much focused on pure form that, for instance, design was considered to be the primary aesthetic value of all fine arts, because as pure form it can be realized unchanged in any amount of material. This is now known to be an error. Indeed, we must go further and admit that the absolute size of a form of art considerably influences its aesthetic significance, and that this significance is readily modified by the very smallest change of dimensions even if the form remains the same. Nevertheless, the aesthetic value of things remains attached to their form, for example to the relation between its elements, although we now know that the character and the effect of this form is essentially codetermined by the amount of its realization. Perhaps it is no coincidence that a great many proverbs, but only a few of the innumerable folk songs, appear to deal with money despite its predominant importance. Thus, when a rebellion broke out owing to a change in coinage, the folk songs generated by the people on this occasion by and large disregarded the coinage problem. The irreconcilable and, for all aesthetic interests, decisive antagonism always remains in the emphasis placed on whether we value things according to their form or ask for the amount of their value. This value is a merely quantitative one which replaces all quality by a mere sum of equal units. One can even say that the more the value of an object rests on its form, the more irrelevant is its monetary value. If the greatest works of art that we possess, for example, the Delphic Charioteer and Praxiteles' Hermes, Botticelli's Spring, the Mona Lisa, the Medici tombs and Rembrandt's self-portrait existed in 1,000 identical copies, then it would make a big difference to the happiness of mankind, but their ideal, objectively aesthetic value or their value in the history of art would in no way be enhanced above the point that a single, already existing copy represents. It is certainly different in the case of handicraft works where the aesthetic form and the practical purpose are completely unified, so that often the most perfect realization of this practical purpose is its real aesthetic attraction. Here it is essential, for the whole value created in this way, that the object is also used and therefore its ideal importance grows with its popularity. If the object makes room for value elements other than form, then the number of times the object is created becomes important. This is also the basis of the deepest connection between Nietzsche's ethical value theory and his aesthetic frame of mind. According to Nietzsche, the quality of a society is determined by the height of the values achieved in it no matter how isolated they may be. The quality of a society does not depend on the extent to which laudable qualities have spread. In the same way, the quality of an artistic period is not the result of the height and quantity of good average achievements but only of the height of the very best achievement. Thus the utilitarian, who is interested solely in the tangible results of action, is inclined towards socialism with its emphasis on the masses and on spreading desirable living conditions, whereas the idealistic moralist, to whom the more or less aesthetically expressible form of action is crucial, is usually an individualist, or at least, like Cont, someone who emphasizes the autonomy of the individual above all else. The same is true in the realm of subjective happiness. We often feel that the highest culmination of joie de vivre, which signifies for the individual his perfect self-realization in the material of existence, need not be repeated. To have experienced this once gives a value to life that would not, as a rule, be enhanced by its repetition. Such moments in which life has been brought to a point of unique self-fulfillment, and has completely subjected the resistance of matter in the broadest sense to our feelings and our will, spread an atmosphere that one might call a counterpart to timelessness, to species aeternitatis, a transcendence of number and of time. Just as a law of nature does not derive its significance for the state and coherence of the world from the number of its instances but from the fact that it exists and is valid, so the moments of the highest transcendence of the self have meaning for our life because they once occurred. No repetition that did not add anything to their content could enlarge this meaning. In brief, the concentration of our evaluations on form brings about an indifference towards its quantitative moments, whereas it is precisely its formlessness that points towards its decisiveness for value. As long as an innumerable sequence of purposes does not yet intersect in money as at the height of a culture based on a money economy, and as long as the specific structure of a culture is not yet atomized and converted to absolute flexibility, we encounter phenomena in which money still displays specific forms. This is the case if greater sums cannot be replaced by the addition of smaller ones. Traces of this phenomenon are exhibited in barter transactions. Among some peoples, cattle can be exchanged only against iron or cloth, but not against tobacco despite its easy exchangeability. Elsewhere, on the island of Yap for example, the extraordinary variety of types of money, bones, mother-of-pearl shells, stones, pieces of glass, etc., are graded. Despite the fact that the relationship between lower and higher kinds of money is well established, certain valuable objects such as boats or houses cannot be paid for with an equivalent amount of many pieces of money with a low denomination, but have to be paid for by a specific kind of money which stands high in rank order of types of money. This same restriction to money of a specific quality is also to be found in the purchase of women and cannot be replaced by a larger quantity of other kinds of money. The reverse is also true. In some places gold is never used to pay for large quantities of goods of small value, but is used exclusively to buy particularly expensive things. This group of phenomena does not correspond to the regulation of our gold standard in which payments above a certain level can be asked for in gold whereas other metals have to be accepted for smaller amounts. Such a fundamental and technical distinction between money as a standard and token money does not seem to exist for every usage.